The summer and autumn period of 2019 were a total joy for me, and never in my wildest dreams had I imagined I would be up to my eyes co-writing the music to one of the more obscure plays written by Shakespeare, his rather challenging Troilus and Cressida. But there I was, day and night, surrounded by a plethora of amazingly talented actors, actresses, stage and costume designers, musicians, and all sorts of magical people, all coming together to create a Shakespeare family for a few months. Well, one actress who just seemed to sweep the stage up with her extraordinary presence and charisma was Adjoa Andoh, who played Ulysses, hailing from the fiery Greek camp. And certainly Adjoa's fire and zest were electrifying, and I simply could not take my eyes off her. And of course, Adjoa has graced our TV and cinema screens and our playhouses and much more with extraordinary performances over a number of years now. But, you know, seeing her live in the most special surroundings of the Royal Shakespeare Theatre in Stratford-upon-Avon was actually truly something else. And it really was. It really was. And, you know, I just can't thank you for the experience, because this was the first time I had ever been involved in writing for theatre. And so the whole journey was just a totally new environment for me. And I think the thing that struck me was, well, as I said earlier, I mean, it's this family that's created, you know, when you're working on a project from scratch, and it was quite amazing.
It's wow. Well, I'm amazed that's the first time you've written for theatre, because it was so brilliant, Evelyn. So everything you said, I have to say to you, I'm such a fan. I worked with a composer years ago called Julie Cooper, and I believe that. Yeah, so Julie and I did my first equity job with Julie in 1985. I think she'd just come out of music college, and so I came to you through Julie, and so I've been a fan. So I was absolutely thrilled when Greg said that you were going to be composing for Troilus and Cressida. I was like, so excited.
Dear me.
So
I mean, when you are working with music. In a live situation like that, I mean, how does that work for you? Do you prefer to know what that musical score may be ahead of time, or are you surprised if suddenly it emerges once you've all worked out what you're going to do, you know, as actors and actresses? Does it throw you off in certain situations? What actually happens?
I think the process of rehearsing is one of evolution. So to a degree, I mean, it's one of the things I love the most. You know, somebody has an idea and it gets from here to the page, and then at some point down the track, it gets from the page into a room, and then all these other creative minds come to bear on it. And it's almost like the finished product is another thing entirely, because it becomes the fusion of all the hearts and skills and souls that have poured into the piece. So every time it's different, and I wouldn't like to know the whole score ahead of time, because I don't know who I am until I've no idea who I am until I'm in the rehearsal, and quite often I don't know who I am till somewhere in the previews, because it becomes a different thing again once you put it in the space. And then when you're in dialogue with the audience, the bodies in the space make a difference again. So I loved being sort of drip fed your music, and then it all coalescing into this huge whole. And I loved all the movement sessions we had, where we were thinking about how we would work with the music and how it informs your performance. You know that Ulysses has that great big speech at the beginning about the planets, the disordered planets, and I love the sense of the percussion being the music of the spheres. I loved that, and I was really sort of I really sort of fell into that notion, as Ulysses. Obviously Ulysses, the dog fox, he's Ulysses is the arch manipulator, so draws on anything. So for me, that notion of the music of the spheres and the sense of us being, carbon bouncing off each other.
Yes.
Planets, human beings, everything. We're bits of carbon bouncing off each other, and so we're the same as, in my head, we're the same as the instruments to a degree, because it's just a different formulation of the carbon, and what that does to your soul and how that informs the way you are moved by music, and how that comes out in your character within the narrative of any piece. I love all that. My father's a musician, my brother's a musician, my nephew's a musician, my grandmother was a musician. I'm not a musician. All I ever wanted to be was a bass player in a punk band.
Never too late.
Well, you say that, Evelyn.
Never too late. But so, yeah. Sorry for interrupting, because what I found very interesting. I remember doing Shakespeare at school, of course, and I didn't enjoy it, to be honest. I really didn't enjoy it, and it was quite dry. It didn't seem to inspire me, and I was slightly dreading, on the one hand, this project, and it took me an awful long time to say yes to it, to agree to it. And I spent many months, and Greg Doran, who was extremely patient, from the Shakespeare Company, was just saying, well, have you thought more about it, and so on. And I was frightened by the language. I was frightened by not necessarily understanding fully what this story was about. And it's interesting that, during this whole lockdown period, you actually have started with the Royal Shakespeare Company a project called Homework Help. And this is trying to decipher, the language of the plays. And you commented on the fact that, well, just imagine it's someone speaking in a different accent. And that's so interesting, actually. And if only that was said when I was, 13, 14, 15 years old, that might have just made the difference, just that one comment.
Yeah, I know. I like you, Shakespeare was done. I think Shakespeare's quite often done no favours in the way that it's sort of a box ticking exercise at school quite a lot of the time. And I'm sure teachers aren't best thrilled at the way they have to disseminate the work quite a lot of the time. I mean, he's not supposed to be read. It's like, it's almost like saying, well, hello children, here's a piece of music. Now just read this musical score. Enjoy. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
You go to hear the play. That's why it's an auditorium. You don't go to read the play. He was banging it out at a rate of knots. People were just getting their parts. So you didn't see the whole play. It's a live experience. You're supposed to follow the story. What's going on? And I just remember, I've done Julius Caesar twice now. I've played Portia for Greg, and I played Casca for Nick Heitner at the Bridge. And Julius Caesar was my O-level play. And I remember we had to read round the class. Can you imagine? Read the play around it was just, it was death. Yeah. It was so dreary. Nobody knew what they were saying. You couldn't hear half the people, So I just think the first thing, go and see a play, go and see it. I remember my first Shakespeare was, I saw The Tempest, and Captain Mannering off of Dad's Army was playing Prospero.
Oh my Lord.
I know.
Wow. Can you imagine?
It was so exciting.
Brilliant.
And I just, that's the way you need to come at it. Like, I think of Shakespeare, go and see a panto, go and see a Shakespeare. It's the same thing. If it's good, it's good. Obviously the language of Shakespeare is different from He's Behind You, but there should be that level of entertainment and engagement.
And Troilus and Cressida really was, because what was hugely helpful in this whole process was attending the very first rehearsals when you were all together. Do you remember in London and in I can't remember exactly the venue.
In Clapham, in the rehearsal rooms in Clapham.
And you were all sitting around this table with Greg, and you literally started with the first sentence of the play. And he went round each person more or less and said, well, what do you think that means? And, you know, many of you had different ideas as regards to how you might have interpreted or translated it or whatever. And I think what he was looking for, or from what I could gather anyway, I mean, I was sitting, you know, in a corner of the room, but trying to think, well, how do you translate that particular sentence or phrase of Shakespeare, and then how might it be interpreted? And it's just so similar to music, you know, looking at a phrase on a printed page, thinking, yep, that's how I would interpret the piece, or rather translate the piece. However, you go away and think about how you may interpret it. And sometimes you do need other forces for that.
Yeah. So when I direct now, especially if I'm directing Shakespeare, I've just nicked from Greg the notion. Steal from the pros. Well, you've got to do it. You've got to do it. The thing that he does on day one of rehearsals that I really love is you don't read your own part. You read, as you described, you read round the table. You know, just the coincidence of where you happen to be sitting. That's what. And if it lands on you and it was your part, it skips to the next person, because it makes you have to pay attention to the whole play. And then we all have ownership as a company. And as you say, you become that family, and this is your story. Because what can happen with actors, you know, it's white noise, my lines. So if suddenly you're not allowed to do your lines, then you have to pay attention to the whole thing. And I love that. And in my rehearsal rooms, I always run them like that now. Just so everyone gets...
On you go.
No, I was just going to say, just so everybody gets ownership of the whole thing. It's everybody's.
Absolutely. And I mean, can you imagine orchestras doing that? You know, sitting with a full score, and you've got the trombones and the percussion and the violas and the clarinets and the double basses, and saying, right, well, this is how I feel this particular part, or that's how I feel the double basses, and how it might influence how I play my violin part or the symphony. Incredible.
I think the thing with orchestras is that you're all on stage together for the whole piece in an orchestra. Whereas with a cast of actors, I mean, sometimes people go, in this production, we're all going to be on stage for the whole time. And most actors go, kill me now. I just want... Don't make... so that happens sometimes, but generally, if it's not your bit, you're off out the back, having a cup of tea or having a pee, or flicking through your emails, or something equally banal. So this thing of going round to table and all being together at the start may be the only time that you're in the room for the whole story. Because when then you're in rehearsal, you're in your little, you come in for your scenes, or you know, so and
they always say that, you know, it's often in a social situation that you really get to know a person. That's an obvious thing to say, but where that can make a difference, how you react or how you interact with a person on stage. So I mean, a teeny example of that in my own situation is that I work quite a bit with a jazz trio, and they're extraordinary musicians, but it's actually meeting them for a drink or a cup of tea or having something to eat in between the times that you can tell an awful lot about that person, and it then makes you have a better understanding as regards to their musical choices or projection, etc., on stage.
I directed Richard II at the Globe last year, and because it was all women of colour and it had never been done before. So before we started rehearsals, I had 3 days which I called cultural sharing days. So everybody came in. We didn't read the play, but what we did, we had people come and talk to us about the history of the play, the history of what was happening for Shakespeare at the time that he wrote the play, and then concepts around history that we wanted to to bring it to bear. And then I said to everybody, so when you come in, bring a piece of music, a piece of fabric, a poem, a dance, a sculpture, a piece of cake, whatever. Bring something that resonates personally for you and the play. And we just spent days talking about our lives, about how the pieces resonated, what the play meant to us. So it's that thing you were talking about, that it's the equivalent of going for a coffee or a glass of wine or whatever, and just getting to know each other. And you absolutely do resonate in a different way on stage when you've got that that connection, that sort of soul connection, something sort of deep.
Absolutely.
And the work is always richer for it if you've had the time to make those connections, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, what was so extraordinary was the audience interaction during that whole period. And I just wonder, do you have a preference whether to be on that stage in a live situation interacting with the audience there and then, or do you like the combination of doing television work, cinema work, films and so on? What is that difference?
Well, I like doing all of it, as long as the material's good. Really, because then you have to live up to the material and you get excited and you have to bring all your experience and your intelligence and your emotional intelligence to bear on the work. So I love that. The thing about a live experience, I think, whether it's music or theatre, it's unique. It's that experience cannot be replicated because there are so many factors. That combination of audience will never be the same on any other performance. Maybe it was raining. Maybe that's affected how everybody is. Maybe you've had a terrible afternoon before you came to the theatre, or you've had a fabulous afternoon. It's absolutely unique. And you know that thing they say about when you get lots of bodies together in a space, our heartbeats start to align. It's such a humanly unique thing to be gathered in communion and sharing an experience together. I think it's something really precious about that. And I suppose at the moment we're all super aware of how precious that is when we find ourselves not able to do that. So I do love a live experience. The live experience is also absolutely terrifying. You can't go, cut, can we go again? I dropped a line. So there's something about that means you have to dig yourself out. And there's something quite thrilling about that. If you mess up, fix it. You have to fix it. Or you rely on your colleagues to come in with the next line or to save you, dig you. I remember years ago I worked with an older actor. It's quite early on in my career, and we had this really long scene. Every night I'd have to eat 2 rhumbarбas. I've never eaten a rhumbarбas. But he was a fantastic actor, but he was just starting to forget his lines. And so I knew that I had to know the whole scene so that at any moment I could just take us onto the next bit. Well, so you do rely on there's something really beautiful about the live experience for that. And I love things like, when you can just go and speak to somebody and say, and give them the line. And it's just you and them. Yeah. And it's almost like there's this unique little performance, and then everybody else is seeing something they'll never see on another occasion because you'll be a different arrangement of people. But then, there's something I love what you can do with film. I love how extraordinary that can be. And again, you have to be on your toes in a different way, because then you've got, generally a load of blokes sort of feeding wires or holding a boom. Can you get it right? All of that stuff. So you've got to be on your toes for that as well. And then I love doing radio. I do lots of radio and lots of audio work because then it's like all of that is boiled down and it's just your voice. Everything that you might do with a great lighting designer or some special effects, no, none of that. It's just you and the microphone and the listener's ear. And I really love the intimacy of that as well.
Absolutely. It's so interesting, because I suppose I can only liken it to the difference of performing as a musician in a recording studio, whereby you're thinking about tone
yes,
very much more than if you're in a concert platform and everything is projected and magnified, and you feel you can take lots of chances. And okay, if they haven't heard it up in the balcony, well, you know, that's that kind of thing, but you really take the chances there. To then, as you say, having a television crew, and you're seeing all of these wires and booms and this and that, and and you know, you don't know which way to turn sometimes, and you don't quite know who you're performing to. You know, it's three very different scenarios. Which is quite interesting, really. But in your mind, what's the difference between being listened to and being heard?
Well, I think everybody who's watching your performance is listening to you, but whether it's landing, which is the hearing bit for me, being heard. I remember I directed a production of Merchant of Venice with the third years at Rose Bruford, and I decided that I wanted to make the Jews Falasha Jews from Ethiopia, some of the oldest Jewish communities in the world. And I wanted to have them coming to Italy, to Lampedusa, as we're seeing at the moment, lots of people from the African continent coming as refugees to Europe, ending up in Italy. So I wanted to just tell the play straight, but with that sort of casting and that sort of perspective, just to give it another echo, I guess. And one of the cast members, he was playing Bassanio, who I had Bassanio being one of the Jews who'd come and had become assimilated into Italian society. His mum came to see a performance of it, and actually Chombo, the guy's name was, his family were from Kenya, and they'd come as refugees, and she came up to me afterwards and she just said, "Oh, you were telling my story. Wow. And no, I wasn't. I was just telling the Merchant of Venice. But she resonated with it. So for me, she heard the story, because all of her life experience was brought to bear on the narrative that she was being presented with, that she was listening to, but she heard it in a very personal way. So I suppose for me, that's the difference. I remember going to see David Hare's Plenty with Kate Nelligan. I was doing my A-levels. I was very depressed. I did have a nervous breakdown in the sixth form. And drama was one of my few joys. So I was doing drama O-level. You had to go and see a play, and then you had to write, a report on what you've been seeing. So I went on to a matinee and sat in the cheap seats in the gods. And the play is about a young woman who, during the Second World War, she's been a secretary in London, and she's got a facility for languages, and she ends up being involved in special ops in France. Is an amazing spy, and suddenly is excited by life and really good at what she does. And then she has to come back to England, and she has a big love affair, has to come back to England, and then she's in sort of post-war austere London, and she's a secretary again, and she's heartbroken. And I sat in the gods and I wept. And for me, I just understood that there's a possibility that you can be your best self in life and grab that opportunity. And I was really fascinated, because I thought, here I am, I'm a young black girl growing up in the Cotswolds in the 70s. This is a young white woman in 1940s London during the war. And absolutely, that play spoke to me. Absolutely. I heard that play in a really powerful way that made me say, hang on in there, you'll be okay. And B, go and be an actor. That's what you've always wanted to do, be an actor. Because there was something magical that happened in that space, that David Hare could have had this idea about this woman, and it spoke to me. in my circumstances. And I sort of got the power of that creative communication, I guess. So,
That's an
hearing and listening.
Yes, that's an extraordinary sort of experience and story to really understand and internalize, and to have that influence your way moving forward. But yet you went on to study law.
I did, because I was also still a good African daughter. So
interesting.
Yeah, I did. Well, what I did was I finished my A-levels horribly badly. Went and worked for Lloyd's Bank for a year because I was convinced I was never going to do education again. I was sick of it. And a year of Lloyd's Bank made me go, so the law degree, where is it? So then I did 2 years of a law degree, but actually I still wanted to be an actor. And I joined a Black women's group, and I met a woman in my Black women's group, and we went to Greenham Common. We did all of that. And I met a woman in my Black women's group who was an actress from the San Francisco Mean Troupe, and she was running acting classes. So when I bailed on my law degree, I did two things. I took up the cello, and I started doing Deborah's acting classes. And then she got funded to do a show in London, and I came to London, and I've been here ever since.
That's amazing, isn't it? Really, how things, the twists and turns of life. And I mean, your work is all about telling a story, you know, through a character, and making us feel as though we are having that character right in our very own homes, in our own room, in our living room. And how has the whole process of coronavirus, how has that changed your particular story? You know, since lockdown, all of the challenges that we're facing, what have been the changes for you during these past few months?
Well, I think one of the big things is the joy of being with other people and creating has really been derailed in a way. I mean, I just don't know what we've done if this had happened 30 years ago and we didn't have Zoom or the internet, or I mean, because I've directed 2 shows over Zoom. I did a 3rd year show at RADA over Zoom, and then another smaller piece, a play that I was interested in personally. And it's doable, and it's actually rather interesting, the things you can do. You know, I'm going to hand you my phone, Evelyn, and then you put your hand up there and you receive the phone. So you can do all sorts of, we had fights, we had fighting, we had the whole thing, you know, it was fantastic. You know, do you want a piece of cake? Yeah, thanks. Oh, lovely. So, you know, there's so much, I just kind of went, okay, so we can't do what we normally do. How can we use this medium to try and do something? How can we be together and be creative? So that was actually quite interesting. I've done an awful lot of monologues and all sorts of things like that, which is fine. I've actually been incredibly busy, but this frame is not the same as hanging out in a room with a bunch of people.
No,
and I think that's that community. I've longed for that. Yeah, I have. I'm starting to get into rehearsal rooms and theatres again. I'm doing a thing at the Young Vic this weekend, and we're performing, and people are filming is happening again. But it's I think the main story for me over the lockdown period has just been the way coronavirus has exposed all sorts of things. Absolutely socially, socioeconomically, all the things that we know about who survives best, people with cash. But also it's exposed those things that we know to be true. Human beings need touch. They need to be in communication with, they need to be seen, they need to be heard, they need to be experienced. And when we've missed that, when we've not been able to do that, we suddenly understand the value of it. I think the creative arts, although I think there's a huge amount that needs to happen, the support that needs to come from government, theatres that need to be mothballed, not allowed to fall off the cliff, music venues, similarly, all that stuff. But what it's made us understand is we like to be in communion with each other. We're built for community. We're built to share things. It's not even like a wartime experience where people still gathered, and even though things were tough.
That's true. It's interesting you should say that, because just the other day, a lady who had gone through the Second World War was asked, well, is this virus situation more challenging than the war, or vice versa? And she said, oh, this is definitely, the virus is definitely more challenging, because during the war they could come together, they could still dance, and yes, they were exposed to the news of death, and for many, many families, that was too close to home, but basically they were able to come together, and if anything, more together than even before, because they were supporting each other. And that now, we can't see this person, that person, I can't see my family or members of the family, and I can't go to this place or that place, and she definitely said this was more challenging for her, and I'm sure everybody has their own experiences. And it is interesting that you've been, using technology to really, reach out and expand, I suppose, there's always a way to do something. And I wonder if for the young generation, so for our school kids and so on, where technology is almost like an extension of their limbs, they're just so easy with it, and whether they might actually feel, what, I would like to get into acting or to some sort of aspects of production or whatever, but they might have been introduced to that through something that's happened via Zoom. Can you believe?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, yes, actually, I did a workshop last week in a theatre, at the Bush in Shepherd's Bush. I'm an associate there, and my good friend Lynette is the artistic director there. And so I ran a workshop on text. How do you work with unfamiliar texts? And we had 10 people live in the theatre, and then we had about another 25 on Zoom. And we had a massive screen, and I made everybody, it's a workshop, so you all have to work, do stuff. So and I it may have been that those 25 people on screen would have attended in person in the theatre, but it may be that they are in Skegness or wherever, and wouldn't have been able to schlep down to Shepherd's Bush to see. So there are ways in which you can expand the conversation in a way, in a way that's been thrilling. I know my all the NT Live type things have been fantastically brilliant. My mum lives in the middle of Shropshire, up a quite a steep hill, but has been able to watch all sorts of theatre during lockdown because stuff has been made available. So I think we are kind of really lucky that we've got this technology available, but at the same time, it is the curse of doom when you're on Zoom for 12 hours, that sort of thing.
You can get zoomed out, really.
You can get so zoomed out, and I think people get very tired. And somebody said to me they're longing to see the back of people's heads.
Yeah,
because
that's very funny.
They just get this 2D.
They do, and a bookshelf.
And a
very impressive bookshelf you have too.
Well, this bit of the room's clean, so we'll just do it here. We've got a window.
And it's so interesting because obviously over the past few months, we've all been so aware of the amazing work that our NHS workers have done, the frontliners, and so many people in our community. We've been tapping into so many people's stories, and I suppose technology again has allowed us to do that, and we've been very much impacted by just the realness of people's situations. And it sort of draws me to the question, and that obviously you were an actress in Casualty for a several series.
Yeah, 3 years. 3 years. Yeah.
3 years. And so I suppose I'd just like to know, how realistic was that situation, in depicting the whole medical scene, what goes on in a hospital and so on. How realistic was that?
Well, we had a team of medical advisors. We were filming in Bristol then. They're in Cardiff now. But we had medical advisors who, also were proper doctors and did proper working in hospitals, and paramedics and nurses. So we had a whole range of advisors. So there's always a compromise between realism and depiction of real situations in drama, because obviously drama must take place. So if you come into my cubicle for 5 minutes now, this thing that's been troubling you for 40 years, don't to give you well, I think we're gonna solve it now. Yeah. So you kind of go, yeah. So the realism of that, maybe not so much, but they and obviously they would adapt some medical things to suit the drama, but the procedures, there was a brief moment where I did know about your dots and what tachycardic meant, and all the Latin blah, blah, blah. He's got as you're pushing the trolley down there, he says over there, get me 5 pounds of all of that. I did know briefly what I was talking about, but my mind's on a need to know basis, so it's like, and wipe.
Yes.
But I suppose so, and you would get the cheeky medical advisor who would go, yeah, that person's not very good at Latin. Let's give them a really long word in episode 5. And then you see them behind the camera like that, watching this poor actor. Take 10. So, but I think the thing is that you wanted to honour the people whose lives you were representing as well. So I wanted to, if I was a ward sister, I wanted to be, I wanted to honour ward sisters. So, hardworking, wise, occasionally quite grumpy, and quite fierce if somebody's messing about, but also really gentle and empathetic and all those things, and super professional and across things. But then also, kind of going, yes, and they're human beings, and their kids got measles, or they've just split up with their partner, or the boiler exploded and they've still got to get on shift by 6 a.m. So you want to sort of bring all that in, and I would check in with my medical friends and family members they watch those shows. People in the medical profession. I mean, sometimes people are watching them to go, yeah, got that wrong. Not bad. Okay. There's little scorecards going on. But if they thought it was truly dreadful, I'm sure they wouldn't watch. So
it's hugely popular.
Yeah.
It's a hugely popular series. Do you still watch it?
No.
I
no. Once Evelyn, the thing is, once you've been in something like that, you're sort of, you can't help it. You're going, and there's a mid shot, and we're just going to come around the side of the thing. You can't. My brain can't divorce from the technical stuff of.
Interesting.
I can see people being stacked up for the shot. Okay, so we're going to have the monitor there, and we'll have this person. So it's really awful. You want to switch your brain off and go, can I just go back to the magic of getting lost in the story? And you kind of go, not with that show. You'll have to watch ER or something else.
It's so funny because in a way, I find myself, if I'm watching another soloist, or even if it's not a soloist, but a group of musicians, certainly I'm always thinking about the whole logistical aspect of those musicians simply functioning, everything that's perhaps going on backstage, and the technicalities. And it is hard to just sit there and simply enjoy the music, and only the music, and just let things go. There's always these things firing in your mind.
I know.
Yeah.
Can I just ask you, how was it different composing for theatre as opposed to Evelyn Glennie composing a piece that Evelyn Glennie wants to compose because that's what's on your heart or in your mind?
Oh gosh, there were so many challenges, and you know, thankfully I had the wonderful support of my co-composer David Price, and who is much more experienced in writing for theatre. And I think for me it was absolutely crucial to be in as many of the initial rehearsals with you all as possible, reading through the lines, trying to understand what the story was about, the characters and so on. And that was the most crucial part, really, because I needed to know, you know, who those characters were and what sort of sounds, a sound world that could be appropriate for that particular character or the particular scene, the particular mood, and so on. And finding out what the high points were, the climaxes, and what needed to be supported musically or what needed to be almost handed over with the actual voices. So when the voices became the music and when the music was the music, if you know what I mean?
Yes, no, absolutely.
And not to interfere, but or when the voices needed to lead and then the music, you know, then it takes over. There are all sorts of things. So the script was very much part of the musical score, but that wasn't just going to happen by reading through, you know, the play at home, not understanding half of it, and just hoping for the best. So it was really crucial to have all of those weeks together and just build everything up like stepping stones. And then, I mean, thankfully, you know, Greg Doran wanted a really percussive score. And so that I was already, you know, a happy bunny. And I knew I could be really experimental with the sounds. So it didn't, I didn't really have to find a nice melody or a memorable melody or anything like that, because it was such a hodgepodge of this and that, of extremes, and the fact that he wanted a percussive set, you know, all of the garbage stuff hanging, you know, from the ceiling, and the big crates, you know, at the back where you all appeared from, and to have instruments within the crates and so on. I mean, this was all very different, I think, to what had gone before. So it was very much a collaborative effort. And I think then, you know, once I had the basic skeleton, and Dave and I recorded many different sounds here where I'm sitting right now.
It's fantastic behind you. Is this your studio?
This is my office, can you believe? And it's
I can believe.
A lot of the instruments are held, but it is possible to record a few bits here too. And so Dave and I just, you know, recorded lots and lots and lots of different types of sounds, different dynamics, different, you know, resonances, different frequencies, you name it. And so we just had all of this, you know, in files, and not knowing what we'd need and what might be useful and so on. And then as we both attended all of these sessions we had together in London and then eventually Stratford, it was a case of and then trying to get a structure in place. But what I loved was the collaborative effort and the time to do this, because normally I'm so used to just going in, out for concerts where you almost sometimes feel as though you're on a conveyor belt. But this was a project you knew would last several months, and you had to dedicate yourself to that. So all the concerts during that period had to almost, you know, disappear more or less from the diary. And that was a scary thing for me, because that's what I do. But so yeah, it was absolutely fascinating to just feel the respect that everybody had for each person's discipline. I think that was very important. And you know, you always say that success never happens in isolation, and that was very much true, or I felt that was the case, that that things, you know, we're all part of that chain and part of the building blocks to make something happen. But then once the I think once we started rehearsing the whole play, literally from more or less beginning to end, and really seeing how things might flow, I think that
Yes.
was a telling moment as to musically, you know, whether this was working.
Yeah.
And so it all took time, you know, and it definitely was a new experience to see the length of time that's needed for something
Yeah.
to happen in theatre.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, very
It
interesting.
all it has to it all has to marinate down, doesn't it? And you have to revisit things and feel how they've shifted or they've settled in the body or the narrative, or yeah.
Absolutely. And I think also logistically, uh, you know, because when you think of the Shakespeare Theatre, it's not actually huge, you know, it's a
No.
very intimate space indeed. And there are many ideas that I had in my mind where I wanted, you know, players to come from there to there, and singers and other musicians who are normally in the little back room and they have to have a screen to watch what's
Yes,
going on
yes,
on
that's
stage.
right. That's
You know,
right.
I
Yeah, I
wanted them
know.
to peer, you know, suddenly walk across
Come
the
out.
bridge and
Yeah.
all sorts of things. But
Oh, wow.
practically, it just wasn't going to be possible
Mm.
to do that in the end. But yeah, it was a fascinating experience.
I loved it when they were on stage. I loved it when musicians were on stage. It was so fantastic. You know,
Oh, I know the physical
all of that.
aspect
Oh,
was
it's
just fun.
fantastic.
It is fantastic, and I think
Yeah.
it's wonderful to be in that situation where you can learn from each other, you know, in disciplines that you're not normally exposed to. And I
Yeah.
learned an awful lot as a musician, as a composer, and I wished in a way I had that experience as a music student, you know, to just
Interesting. Yes.
broaden possibilities, to be aware. What was so interesting I found was
Yeah.
projection from you all, and that's something that you are just a master of. It's the presence. So, you know, the presence of projecting, even if you're not saying something. And it's almost as though the presence of so-called silence in between notes in a piece of music, it's that. So it's not just waiting until you play the next thing. And that's what I found so fascinating, the way that you all use space, you
Yeah.
know, and how that had drama. And this is probably so basic for actors, I don't know, but for musicians to experience that from a different medium, I find really, really interesting and very, very powerful, actually. So
Mm.
it did make me think of, you know, how I interpreted certain pieces, you know, when I went into the privacy of my own four walls to just deal with certain pieces of music.
Yeah.
I kind of rethought things based on that experience of being with you all in the theatre, that presence. And we always say as musicians, well, your musical instrument isn't the clarinet or the voice or a marimba or a drum kit or something.
Mm.
It's the space that you're in. That's the instrument. That's what you paint sound with.
Yeah.
And that's what I saw with you is you're painting expression, you know, through movement, through facial expressions, and so dynamic. And you could really pick that up in the environment of the theater, you know, and the audience would react to that. It was quite
Yes.
special.
Yes. Oh. Oh, that's fantastic. Oh,
Mm.
I language is music.
It
I
is.
think, you know, so, and it's really interesting sometimes you're working with an actor or I'm working as an actor,
Mm.
and there's a line and somebody trips over it and they just keep tripping over it. And
Mm.
in the end, you kind of know it's because the music's not right. The music of the
Mm.
line isn't right. And it, and then you have to, you know, especially if it's new writing, then you have to look at the line. You have to
Mm.
readdress the line because it's not singing right. It's not. But always you're having to, whether you're working on Shakespeare or whatever, you have to work out what's the song of this,
Yeah.
what's the
Yeah.
music of it, how do I embed it, how do I embed it. so that I can deliver it with ease. And it's always about finding the music of whatever it is you're saying. So this weekend I have this a new piece has been written for me to perform at the Young Vic, and the way I've been sent it sits wrong on the page. I've got to I have to reframe it because to make that so I can see where the music is for me.
Yes.
I can't just, so those sorts of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just very conscious because don't you have
I've got to go. I've got an audition.
An audition? I can't believe that.
Yes.
An audition. Yeah. So it's never ending, really. So
it never stops. Listen, I've worked with some extremely senior and hugely successful actors who, and everybody's still like, what's your next job? What are you doing next? It never goes, the always being sort of, pick me, sir, me. That never goes.
It never goes. So you can never truly be complacent.
You can never be complacent, which is a good thing.
It's a very good thing. And I think
very good thing.
That note, that's a good piece of advice. Keep our feet firmly on the ground.
Absolutely.
Be curious.
Absolutely.
Well, I just, want to say thank you so much for spending this time with me. And
it's been lovely, Evelyn. Thank you.
Well, no, I've just been a real admirer, and I hadn't asked half of the questions that I had lined up. I want to know about Doctor Who. I want to know about all sorts of things, but there's maybe another time. And
another time, absolutely.
I just want to say thanks for inspiring us. Thank you for inspiring me as a musician, and to keep me curious to, explore other territories, but just for all the wonderful joy that you've given to us over the years. And good luck with the audition today.
Thank you very much, Evelyn. And right back at you. You are a fan. No, seriously, you are an amazing role model for all the different aspects of you. You're amazing. So thank you.
Away you go. All right. Well, you take care. Be safe.
All right. I will. You too.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.